Welcome to Ron Talks Tabletop, where Ron talks about his favorite things, board games, RPGs, and a little bit of something else. So sit back, relax, and listen. Hey everybody, Ron here, and welcome to episode 1 of the Ron Talks Tabletop podcast. As I mentioned in episode 0, this podcast will take the format of 3 main segments. I'll have an RPG corner where I will talk about an RPG that I want to highlight. I will have a board game highlight and a little bit of Lagniappe. On with the show. RPG Corner. Today's RPG Corner is going to highlight Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, but really the whole shebang. It was designed by the Wizards of the Coast D&D design team. Really, there's too many people to mention. So many people have worked on the game. It's published by Wizards of the Coast. So, if you don't know what Dungeons & Dragons is, it's a fantasy game where you kill monsters and take their stuff. Some people may take issue with that description, but you can also tell collaborative stories of epic fantasy in what has actually become its own genre over the 40-some-odd years the game has existed. In summary, the mechanics focuses on several polyhedral dice, but particularly the D20. The D20, you roll high, you compare it to a value, which will tell you whether you succeed or fail at an action. Many of its subsystems employ the same mechanic, but you roll the different polyhedral dice for spell effects, damage, and other things. Really, it's a very familiar game now. The game is the granddaddy of them all. It was the first officially published role-playing game. It started the genre. I've played D&D for so long and love it so much that I really wanted to talk about it. One of the things I love about the game is that actually I can play multiple genres of fiction in modern D&D. There are people that don't like that. There are people that still want D&D to be Conan the Barbarian, Solomon Kane, pulp adventure that it was back in the 70s when Dave Arneson and Gary Gygax made it. But I'm actually okay with the way that it is now. I'm more than okay with it. I like being able to play my Westerns, my superhero game, and my pulp adventure in the same setting. And it still feel like fantasy to me. In a way, this is the only way that I'm actually going to get to play some of the types of fiction. Like, it's really hard for me to get people together to play a superhero game in person. I love online gaming, but it's no real substitute for playing face-to-face with people as of right now in 2021. Who knows how things are going to develop in the future. Anyway, I really like the way that 5th edition works mechanically. I like a lot of the flavor. Actually, it has one of my most favorite settings. Actually, the setting started in 3rd edition called the Eberron setting. It's my favorite published fantasy setting, but it's more than just that. So I like that. I like the flavor. And really, as far as this edition of the game goes, 5th edition is the first edition of the game that I did not burn out on since my 2nd edition playing days. 5th edition was released in 2014. It's 2021, so it's going on 7 years. I have not burned out on it. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm just getting started. Unlike with 3rd edition and 4th edition, I eventually burned out on those. This edition of the game may be the last edition of the game that I actually play. I may not move on when inevitably a 6th edition comes. I don't want to rumor monger or whatever like that, but I highly doubt that this game, the 5th edition, is going to be the last edition of Dungeons & Dragons ever released. But it may be the last edition for me. I love it so much, it does what I need it to do. And when I want to do something else, I will find other role-playing games to play. And trust me, people, I will talk about other role-playing games in later episodes of this podcast. But anyway it goes, D&D was my first love as far as role-playing games. And it is one of the key ways that I got into geek culture, and it will always have a special place in my heart. Boardgame Highlight. My board game highlight for today is Marvel United. Marvel United is designed by Andrea Chiavezio and Eric Lang, published by CMON and Spin Master Games. It plays 1 to 4 players, 20 to 40 minutes playtime, ages 8 and up. Team up with your favorite Marvel Comics heroes to defeat the villain before they overrun the city with thugs, helpless civilians, and complete their evil schemes. So in summary, this game is played out by laying out 6 different location tiles in a clockwise manner, where the villain will hop from location to location and play a card and do bad things, while the heroes will play 3 cards in a row and apply the effects in any order as the cards are laid out. The current hero will be able to access the actions of the previous hero, but not their special powers. This creates a dynamic where you really have to think and plan ahead and use great teamwork to defeat the villain. It's a pretty simple game, but it's one of the most cooperative games that I've seen, and that's pretty amazing to me that that can be done. Like I said, it's a simple game. It has to be simple because this is a entry-level game. Kids need to be able to play it. It's sold in big box stores. You just play the cards and apply the effects. But like I said before, it's more than that. Of course, you can have the alpha gamer problem, but I feel that that is more of a personal problem than an actual game problem. The theme on this game is light, admittedly, but it still really works for me. What can I say? I'm a sucker for the Marvel IP. For example, Captain America has a card where he can give wild tokens to other players. That feels like something that Captain America would do to be able to help out other people. And there's a card called Hulk Smash, unsurprisingly, where he does 1 damage to every enemy on a location, and he basically hurts the civilians in a rampage, the way the theme of the card goes. Now, if that's not Hulk Smash, I don't know what is. Captain Marvel can do damage to enemies on an adjacent tile. I feel like with her energy absorption and just her blasting powers, that feels really on theme for me. And there's so many other examples, and I'm not even going to get into. There's so much content for this game, it is absolutely ridiculous. As I'm recording this, they have a Kickstarter for X-Men going on. I did not back the original Kickstarter. I thought about it, but I passed on it. But I picked up the game in Walmart and fell in love with it. So as a result, I'm back in the X-Men Kickstarter. Now, if I wanted to, I could pick up the old stuff in this current Kickstarter, but I'm not going to. Quite frankly, I think I'll have enough just from the base X-Men pledge to keep me busy for quite a while. I love to play it solo, but I'm also looking forward to playing it with my wife and my friends when we get back together in person. And that, my friends, is happening soon, and I'm so excited. So that is Marvel United. If you were ever interested in the game, there you go. I didn't mention that the MSRP is $30, which is something I am quite excited about. That's an affordable price point. So if you like the Marvel IP, you like cooperative games, go look it up and check it out. Lagniappe. Now for my inaugural Lagniappe section, I want to talk about how I got here, my journey to geekdom. It really started early. In kindergarten, there were these yellow readers that had all these fairy tales, knights in shining armor, rescuing princesses from evil dragons. That really captured my young imagination. I wanted more fiction like that. Another thing that got me into geek culture, of course, is Marvel Comics. The neighborhood boys and I would pretend to be superheroes like Angel, Wolverine, Iron Man, Captain America. That was me. One of the guys would basically be the story coordinator. He would set the scenario, and we would go around the neighborhood playing like the superheroes in our comics that we so loved. And of course, I loved reading the comics back then. So when 7th grade rolled around, and I saw this red box with this mighty warrior facing up against a big dragon, I had to know what that box was in my friend Calvin's book bag. Of course, that red box was the basic set for Dungeons & Dragons. This is 1987, in case you were wondering. From there, I went and read The Hobbit and then Lord of the Rings. Actually, the summer before that, I read Starship Troopers. So really, that was the first sci-fi fantasy book that I read. So there was a progression, but by the time I got to Lord of the Rings, I was in deep. I've played role-playing games off and on in high school, but I've played pretty much continually since I started college in 1992. So, for the past 34 years now, as far as my game hobby is concerned, I played those types of games here and there throughout my particularly college age and adulthood, but I really didn't get into the board gaming hobby until about 2013. One of the first hobby board games that I fell in love with, Sentinels of the Multiverse. It's still one of my favorite games to play, and by the way, it's getting a new edition. Well, I would go through my top 20 games so you folks would get a sense for the types of board games that I like. But I've released a bonus podcast episode and released a YouTube video covering just that. So you'll just have to go to those places and check those out if you want to know more. But I'll tell you that 2 of my favorite games are Marvel Champions and War of the Rings 2nd Edition. Should that surprise you? I think not. And that was my journey to geekdom to today. It's been a fun ride. I am truly enjoying being a geek. It is like a geek's paradise in 2021. So it's been a whole bunch of fun. And that was episode 1 of the Ron Talks Tabletop podcast. This was a lot of fun. I really like talking. Even though I'm an introvert by nature, I love talking about my hobbies. I mean, who doesn't love talking about things that they're passionate about? I really hope and intend to keep this up. I said I was going to have a 30-minute podcast, give or take. This is probably going to end up much shorter than that, but that's okay. I just really want to do this because it's fun. I'm enjoying this. So I'm going to keep doing this. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to the Ron Talks Tabletop podcast. All music is by Scott Buckley and covered under a Creative Commons license. Find me on Facebook and Instagram at Ron Talks Tabletop, on Twitter at Ron Talks TBTop, and on YouTube as Ron Frazier. Until next time, safe travels, my friends.